بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على خير خلق الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد. This is a walkthrough of resource 12.2 from the Ajrumiyyah workbook on page number 117. تمارين على معرفة أقسام الكلام وعلامات الرفع. These are review drills for the issues of knowing the different parts of speech as well as the signs of words being marfu'. This resource should be done after studying lesson 13 despite the apparent order of the resources. Our apologies for this oversight. Again, you should attempt resource 12.2 after lesson 13, not after lesson 12. So we have Surah As-Saff along with 15 requests to give examples of certain language items in that table below. And then we have one question on i'rab. May Allah Ta'ala aid us and give us success. It's expected that you're listening to this recording either to get the setup for the activity before you begin or after you've attempted to extract all of the requested language items and you would like someone to go over them with you. In the absence of a real teacher, a qualified one with strong Arabic skills, I am your brother, Moosa Richardson, and I'm here to help you with this activity in the absence of someone better than myself. May Allah Ta'ala forgive me and all of you. So I'll read the verses for you, and then I'll set up the activity for you, and then we'll go over the answers together, or some of the answer possibilities. Insha'Allah Ta'ala. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لم تقولون ما لا تفعلون كبر مقتا عند الله أن تقولوا ما لا تفعلون إن الله يحب الذين يقاتلون في سبيله صفا كأنهم بنيان مرصوص. وإذ قال موسى لقومه يا قوم لم تؤذونني وقد تعلمون أني رسول الله إليكم فلما زاغوا أزاغ الله قلوبهم والله لا يهدي القوم الفاسقين. وإذ قال عيسى ابن مريم يا بني إسرائيل إني رسول الله إليكم مصدقا لما بين يدي من التوراة ومبشرا برسول يأتي من بعد اسمه أحمد. فلما جاءهم بالبينات قالوا هذا سحر مبين. ومن أظلم ممن افترى على الله الكذب وهو يدعى إلى الإسلام والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. يريدون ليطفئوا نور الله بأفواههم والله متم نوره ولو كره الكافرون. هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون. These were the first 9 verses of Surah As-Saff, and you'll need to extract the following language items from these 9 verses. The directions say, فَاسْتَخْرِجْ مِنَ النَّص, so bring out from this text, give examples from this text. And the first 2 items are examples, and therefore the answers are given to you. Bring out a harfa khafdin, like في. The second example is جمع مؤنث سالما مرفوعا. Mention a regular female plural in the marfu' case. And actually, the answer is لا يوجد. You can look from the beginning of the surah all the way to the end of the 9th verse, and you will not find a jam' mu'annath salim, which is marfu'. And so that indicates that there are some answer choices sometimes, possibly, that are not found. It's not a mistake. It is for you to be confident enough to say, لا يوجد. There is no example of this answer. أولا, firstly, حرف خفض آخر. Bring another حرف خفض. ثانيا, فعلا مبنيا. Get an example of a فعل which is مبني, not معرب. ثالثا, فعلا معربا. The opposite, a verb which is معرب. Fourthly, اسما مرفوعا معرفا بالألف واللام. A definite noun which is marfu' and it has the alif lam prefix. Fifthly, فعلا مرفوعا من الأمثلة الخمسة. Bring one of the 5 scaled example verbs that you've studied. And it needs to be marfu'. Sixthly, فعلا مرفوعا آخر من الأمثلة الخمسة. Bring one more example of what you could have provided for request number 5. Seventhly, مرفوعا علامة رفعه الضمة. Notice here, you're asked for a marfu' word. You're not asked for a noun specifically or a verb specifically, but a marfu', a word that is marfu', and its sign needs to be a dhamma. So that should get you thinking, what kind of words have a dhamma as the sign of it being marfu'? Similar to the 8th request, marfu'an علامة رفعه الواو. Another marfu' word which has a waw as its indicator of being marfu'. Ninthly, جمع تكسير. Here, all you need to do is find an irregular plural noun. Tenthly, جمع مؤنث سالما. You need to find a jam' mu'annath salim. Remember, you were asked to find one in the beginning of the table, which was marfu', and there was none. So now you're not being asked for marfu' or mansub or any specific case, but find any jam' mu'annath salim. And number 11, the masculine version, jam' mudhakkarin saliman, a regular masculine plural. 12thly, isman min al-asma' al-khamsa, one of the 5 nouns that you've studied. 13th, marfu'an alamatu raf'ihi an-nun. You'll need to find any marfu' word that has the nun as its indicator of being marfu'. And so you'll need to remember, when is the nun a sign of something being marfu'? Similar is the 14th request, مرفوعا علامة رفعه الألف. Any marfu' word that has the alif as its sign of being marfu'. And then lastly, the 15th request is to find isman munawwanan marfu'an. Any noun that has tanween and it is in the marfu' case. Then the last request under the table is وَأَعْرِبْ قَوْلَهُ تَعَالَى الْعَزِيزِ. And that is the name of Allah Ta'ala found in the first verse. وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ وَالْحَكِيمُ. Make i'rab of the word al-aziz. So now, if you were looking for just a setup of this activity and you want to do it yourself before you go over the answers with me, then now is the time for you to pause the recording and go ahead and do your best in finding these language items and making i'rab of that word. May Allah Ta'ala bless you and grant you success. Pause the recording now. Okay, so now at this point, we're going to go over the answers together. Let's go right to request number 1, حرف خفض آخر. Another حرف خفض, and there were many to choose from. You could have chosen the word كأنهم in the fourth verse. كأنهم بنيان. كأنهم, that kaf is a harfu khafd. Remember, al-kaf. You could have chosen the lam in the next verse. لِقَوْمِهِ وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ, when he said to his people. That lam is another harfa khafd. You could have chosen the word إِلَيْكُمْ in that same verse. وَقَدْ تَعْلَمُونَ أَنِّي رَسُولُ اللَّهِ إِلَيْكُمْ. That's إِلَى plus أَنْتُمْ. It becomes إِلَيْكُمْ. You could have chosen the min in the sixth verse or the ba in the sixth verse as well. And those are just some samples of possible answer choices. The second request, فعلا مبنيا, a fi'l mabni. Remember, the fi'l mabni is either going to be a past tense verb or a command. So we have the very first word of the surah, سبح لله. سبح يسبح تسبيحا. That's a past tense verb. So it's mabniyun ala al-fath. It is mabni. We'll get into that a little later, but remember, we did introduce past tense verbs as being mabni and therefore not part of our discussions of i'rab. We'll never be saying fi'lun madin, marfu' or mansub or majzoom, because remember, past tense verbs are mabni. They don't enter into our discussion of the marfu' or mansub or majzoom cases of verbs. And for this second request, you could have also chosen amanu in the second verse. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. That is a past tense verb as well. Or in the next verse, kabura. Kabura is a past tense verb as well. Kabura maqtan. And the answer choices were many. The third request was to mention fi'lan mu'raban, a fi'l which is mu'rab, the opposite of mabni. And so that's any other verb, meaning fi'l mudari', a present tense verb. So right away in the second verse, there are a lot of them. لِمَ تَقُولُونَ مَا لَا تَفْعَلُونَ. So we have تَقُولُون and تَفْعَلُون. And then in the next verse, أَن تَقُولُوا مَا لَا تَفْعَلُونَ. And then in the next verse, يُحِبُّ. Any of these would have been sufficient answers, and there are many possible answer choices for this third request. Fourthly, اسما مرفوعا معرفا بالألف واللام. Then you could have chosen Al-Aziz or Al-Hakim in the first verse. And why would you not have chosen As-Samawati or Al-Ard? Because those are not marfu'. Remember, اسما مرفوعا معرفا بالألف واللام وهو العزيز. العزيز is اسم مرفوع علامة رفعه الضمة. That's what we're looking for. As for al-ard, then that is اسم مجرور علامة جره الكسرة. More on that will come later, but we know it's not marfu'. The same thing with as-samawati. And there are only 4 possible answer choices for this request. The other 2 are near the end of the passage. In the 8th and 9th verses, we have al-kafirun and al-mushrikun. Al-kafirun is ismun marfu'un alamatu raf'ihi al-waw, as you've studied. And al-mushrikun is ismun marfu'un alamatu raf'ihi al-waw. The 5th request, فعلا مرفوعا من الأمثلة الخمسة. Then mention a fi'l, a verb that is marfu' from the 5 examples. Remember those 5 scales of يفعلان, تفعلان, يفعلون, تفعلون, تفعلين. Those are the أمثلة خمسة. Do we have any of those in these verses which happen to be marfu'? Well, right away in the second verse, we have لِمَ تَقُولُونَ مَا لَا تَفْعَلُونَ. We have تَقُولُونَ with the noon and تَفْعَلُونَ with the noon. So that means both of those verbs are marfu'. Remember, the sign of these kinds of verbs being marfu' is the noon. And if you attempted this resource in the original order of the workbook, meaning after resource 12 and before lesson 13, then this answer would have been a problem for you. So if you took this comprehensive quiz after lesson 13, then you should have been well prepared for it. And my apologies for the flaw in the order of the resources here. Resource 12.2 should actually be resource 13.2. Barakallahu fikum. So for the 5th and 6th requests, you needed 2 examples of al-amthila al-khamsa. And there are a total of 6 in the passage that you could choose from. So firstly, تقولون, تفعلون, يقاتلون, تؤذونني, تعلمون, and يريدون. These are possible answer choices. You could have chosen any 2 of them for answer choices 5 and 6. Request number 7, مرفوعا علامة رفعه الضمة. Any marfu' word that has a dhamma as its sign of being marfu'. This requires us to think back to lesson number 10. What kinds of words will have a dhamma as a sign of them being marfu'? We have al-ism al-mufrad, right? Singular nouns. Jam'u taksir, irregular plurals. Jam'u mu'annath salim, regular feminine plurals. And al-fi'lu al-mudari' alladhi lam yattasil bi akhirihi shay'un, the present tense verb with no suffixes added on. That's a quick review of the 10th lesson. So let's see if that helped us to find our answers. If we focused on fi'l mudari' only, we could have chosen the verb yuhibbu. If we would have looked for singular nouns, we could have chosen al-azizu or al-hakimu right there in the first verse, or bunyanun, marsusun, right at the end of the 4th verse. And I don't think there was an example of a jam' mu'annath salim, which is marfu'. And I also don't think there's an example of a jam'u taksir, which is marfu' either. Then request number 8 is marfu'an alamatu raf'ihi al-waw. We needed any marfu' word, noun or verb, that has a waw as its sign of being marfu'. That means we had to think back to lesson 11 and remember that a word will only have a waw as its sign of being marfu' in one of 2 cases. It has to be either a jam' mudhakkar salim, or it has to be min al-asma' al-khamsa. It has to be one of the 5 nouns. So, after looking carefully, you'll find that you only have 2 language items here that meet this qualification. Al-kafirun and al-mushrikun in the ends of the 8th and 9th verses. Those are both ism marfu' alamatu raf'ihi al-waw, because they are jam' mudhakkar salim. Then request number 9 is jam' taksir. You have 2 possible answer choices of jam' taksir in this passage. قلوبهم in verse number 5, and بأفواههم in verse number 8. قلوب is the plural of qalb, and أفواه is the plural of fu. Request number 10, جمع مؤنث سالما, a regular feminine noun. And so there were also only 2 possible choices. You could have chosen the word as-samawati in the 1st verse, or al-bayyinati in the 6th verse. The 11th request was jam'a mudhakkarin saliman, a regular masculine plural. Then you had 4 possible answer choices, and they were al-fasiqin, al-zalimin, al-kafirun, and al-mushrikun. The 12th request was isman min al-asma'i al-khamsa, one of the 5 nouns. And even though I said bi-afwahihim, afwah is the plural of fu, and fu is one of those 5 nouns, but remember they have to be mudaf. It has to be fu zaydin, abuka wa akhuka wa hamuki wa fuka. Not just fu, but fuka or fu zaydin wa dhumalin. Those are the 5 nouns. So we don't have any examples of this language item. So the correct thing to do is to write la yujad. There is no example of this language item in these verses. Request number 13. Marfu'an alamatu raf'ihi an-nun. A marfu' language item that has the nun as its sign of being marfu'. And that would require us to think back to lesson 13. And again, this being resource 12.2 in this workbook is a flaw in the resources. It should be resource 13.2. So you would have to remember from lesson 13 that the only time the nun will be a sign of a word being marfu' is in al-amthilatul khamsa, those 5 verbs. And you can go back to answer choice 5 and the possibilities that I gave you for that answer. Those are the same choices you could have chosen for answer number 13. Number 14, marfu'an alamatu raf'ihi al-alif. Something that's marfu' and the sign of it being marfu' is an alif. That requires you to think back to lesson 12 and remember that this only applies in dual plural nouns, of which we have no example in these verses, and therefore we would need to write again, la yujadu. And then the 15th and final request is isman munawwanan marfu'a, a noun with tenween that is marfu'. And you could have chosen bunyanun or marsusun at the end of verse number 5. You could have also chosen sihrun or mubinun at the end of verse number 6. Barakallahu fikum. There was another answer choice based on knowledge of qira'at, the different modes of recitation of the Quran. I'll throw that out there. There's at least one more answer based on different qira'at, for those of you who know the different recitations of the Quran. That's not for everyone for sure, definitely not for beginners, not for anyone who doesn't know the concept of qira'at. But if you do, then think about it carefully. In the qira'ah of Warsh, you will find, and perhaps others, you will find another example that you could use for this request. And that's for the advanced students only. Then the last request here in this resource is وَأَعْرِبْ قَوْلَهُ تَعَالَى الْعَزِيزُ. So at this stage, our i'rab will be very simple. It is ismun marfu'un alamatu raf'ihi al-dhammatu. And if you added al-dhahiratu, that's fine. And if you added ala akhirihi, that's also fine. And that's a complete i'rab for as far as we've gone in our i'rab drills at this point. Barakallahu fikum. I apologize again for incorrectly placing this resource after lesson 12 when it should be after lesson 13. May Allah Ta'ala bless you. I hope that you found some benefit in this activity and in this walkthrough. May Allah Ta'ala give you success. وصل اللهم وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.